Hey guys, welcome back to Bayside Online. We are so happy that you are here to join us for our online service. My name's Morgan, I'm on the team here at Bayside. And hey, today is a message from our new series called For Better or For Worse. We're talking all things relationships, marriage, singleness, what you do with all of that. And today, I really think this message applies to everybody. It's called Fight Fair. Pastor Curt is taking us into a message talking about communication styles, why we fight the way that we do, what are the thoughts that go through our head as we're fighting. Now, this fighting can happen with anybody. It can happen with your spouse, with your roommate, with your siblings, with your friends. We really do believe that you have something to get out of today. We believe God's gonna teach you something. So we invite you to sit back, relax, take some notes if you want to, hop in the comment section and let us know where you're watching from. But we really do hope that you enjoy today's service, and welcome to Bayside.
For better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, until death do us part.
Let's go ahead and go into week 2 of our For Better or Worse series. We're calling tonight Fight Fair, Turning Conflict into an Opportunity for Unity. If you've ever had a conflict with someone, raise your hand right now. If that person is sitting next to you, put the other hand up, just surrender. Because we have the most conflict with the people that we live with and are around the most. Here's a picture of Kelly and I. We've been married for 35 years. This is a picture of Kelly and I before, way back before we got married. I got to advance it. I forget doing my job. Where's the remote? Brian, there it is, boom. Okay, good. I go fishing one week, I have to remember everything. Okay, there it is, that's us. Look at me before my face was fat. Look at that, that's so awesome. I can remember what I was thinking here. I was thinking, I have no idea. That's what I was thinking. What was Kelly thinking? Kelly was thinking, he has no idea. Because we really didn't have any idea about how to do conflict. And the problem with conflict is that most of us, left to our own devices, even if we love the person and want it to go well, our conflict strategies will make it worse. I remember we moved to Elk Grove in 2006 from Missouri, and the finances were really tight in the housing market. Does anyone remember that just started plummeting? And our budget was very stressful, and it was very insecure for my wife. It was very insecure for me, and it was very tumultuous for our kids. And I said, we had a meeting. You ever have a meeting, Dad? I called a meeting, and we went over what we could spend and couldn't spend, and there was nothing we could spend, and that was the meeting. And I remember we got a budget for Christmas, and this is really, really hard for us because we love Christmas, and we had a budget for Christmas. Does anyone remember Larry Burkett? Larry Burkett, he was doing the no debt before anyone else was doing it. Dave Ramsey is Larry Burkett, he's the OG. So we were like, here's our budget, here's our envelopes. Does anyone know what I'm talking about with envelopes? And so one day we're getting ready to decorate the Christmas tree, and Kelly goes out, she takes our Dodge minivan to go buy the Christmas tree, and she comes home not with the $35 tree that was in our envelope, but with a $100 9-foot tree. And she's like, look at this gorgeous tree I got. It was gonna be $150. And I'm like, you spent $100 on a tree. And she said, there is no such thing as a $35 tree. And I said, give me the keys to that car and I will go find a $35 tree. And she said, you go find that $35 tree, because I was out there all over the lot. There's no $35 tree. And I said, well, you go take your $100 tree back and then I'll take the van and find a $35 tree. And she said, oh yeah, I'll take him a $100 tree and I'm gonna go and I'm leaving. And she got in the van and left. We sat down to dinner. Now I gotta tell you, I'm trying to think of illustrations like when have Kelly and I had a big fight, and I can only think of 2, and the reason for that is because I forget most of them. I forget them. But I remember we're sitting at the dinner table, and little Maddie looks at me, kindergartner. And she said, Daddy, when is mommy coming back? I said, baby, I don't know. Daddy, why did mommy take Christmas with her? I don't know. Were we too naughty for Christmas this year? Yes, baby, that's the right answer. No, I didn't say that. About 4 hours goes by, the kids are in bed. She opens the door. 20 minutes of silence. Do you ever get so deep into a fight you can't find your way back out? Both of you want out of it, but you can't find the way. She sits down, and we're sitting there 20 minutes, excruciating for me. I'm very verbal, 20 minutes, nothing. I said, what did you do? She said, I drove around Elk Grove for 4 hours. She said, yeah, I drove around Elk Grove a lot. I said, well, what are we gonna do about this? And she said, I don't know. And I said, well, I might have overreacted. And she said, I might have overspent. And I said, I'll go get the tree and I'll bring it in. And I can remember thinking for months and days, how did that happen to us? We love each other, care for each other, we're committed to Christ. I was just one of the most godly friends. I said, how did that happen? And what I realized is that what happened is our ability to have a fair fight didn't exist. We were using the skills and tools that life had given us to that point, and those skills and tools were booby traps. There are three things. By the way, we haven't had a lot of fill in the blanks and a lot of content in the notes since we've been doing Romans, and I'm making up for it this whole sermon. There's about 500 fill in the blanks on this sucker. And by the way, I might even not get to the last 6, and I don't care if you never sleep again. I'm gonna go as far as I can. But we gotta start setting the problem up. Here's the problem. We bring 3 things into our relationships, especially our marriage. And one is personal differences. And what is personal differences? That's the way that you're wired. That's the way that your brain works. So I talk in pencil. When I talk, I just say it. It just comes out, and if I don't like it, I erase it, and I say it again. And my wife, her wiring is she talks in ink, or sometimes she'll say, I talk and I chisel in stone. So she'll think and think and think and think and think and think. And when she says, this is what I want, or this is what I believe, or this is what I feel, you can guarantee for the next 20 years, that is what she thinks and feels. And so this is a big difference. I'm verbal, I'm just throwing it out there. I'm like, why are you crying right now? She's like, the thing you said 14 minutes ago. And I'm like, what? And she goes, bam, you better take me serious. This is what I think. It's a big difference. Then finally, there's family of origin differences. So we grow up and we have different experiences. My mom was a nurse. My dad was a nurse anesthetist. They both worked in hospitals their whole life. So in our family, if you got sick, you got all sorts of attention. You got a lot of nursing. And so they would come and they'd bring you samples from the clinic and they'd take your temperature. And my mom would wear a rag across my forehead and you'd get a cold Sprite and a straw. And you just got nursed. Kelly's family, they grew up very poor. They had no health care at all. So the strategy when you're that poor is if someone gets sick, you go into a room, you shut the door, and everyone pretends you don't exist. And if 4 days later you come out alive, no one talks about it, and you just move on. So this created a huge conflict in our marriage because when I got sick, I'd be laying there in my bed going, where's my Sprite? Where's my comic book? And she'd be nowhere, she doesn't love me, she doesn't care. And then she gets sick and I'd be in there fluffing pillows and giving her comic books. She's like, I don't even read comic books. Would you get out of here? You're driving me nuts. And I'm like, she doesn't appreciate, right? Just because our expectations were so different in our family of origin. And then the last one is there's emotional differences. So there are things that wound you or happen to you that are very, very hard for you. And then later on, your spouse will push that little button and not realizing that that's so hard for you because it's not hard for them. So for instance, my wife grew up and her dad wasn't home at all, wasn't present at all. And about every 4 years, he would come into the picture and he would promise things. I'm gonna take you to Disneyland. I'm gonna buy you a car. I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do that. And she learned that when a guy says promises, it doesn't matter. They don't do it. And I, on the other hand, grew up in a family that was very boisterous, and we would just say whatever we want. We'd make all sorts of plans, and sometimes they happened, sometimes they didn't, and we just throw it out there like dream. And so I would say stuff like, I'd say, hey, man, it'd be great to go to ice cream this week. And what my wife would hear is, you have now vowed to our children that there shall be ice cream within 7 days. And I heard, I'm kind of hungry right now, right? So she's like, why are you so unfaithful? Are we talking about sherbet? See, we had emotional differences. There was a perspective that was different. Do you see this? And so what happens when you have these emotional differences and family differences and personal wiring differences, almost everything you do makes conflict worse. Even if you want to get it right. And this is why couples that love each other, adore each other, have strong feelings for each other, end up in horribly destructive conflicts that add injury and mistrust to the relationship, even though they didn't intend to be there. I didn't intend to hurt you, babe. I didn't intend to do that. So here's the premise. You have to die to your preference of the way you're wired, pencil or ink. You have to relearn your family of origin, and you have to handle conflict biblically. You gotta just retrain yourself. And by the way, I don't care if you've been married 60 years or 6 days, it's never too late, it's never too early to start going, I'm gonna actually not do what I like to do or what I've seen done in conflict. I'm gonna do what God says I should do in conflict. And by the way, the Bible is rich with advice. All of the book of Proverbs is like this. It's rich with advice. Jesus' interactions in conflict. It's rich with advice about how you can renew your mind, retrain your instincts so you don't unintentionally get caught in conflict that is impossible to escape. Now, this passage right here in James 4 is my absolute favorite for this. I've taught this over and over and over again. I've taught this before at Bayside. By the way, if it's a review, tough. You need to hear it more. I guarantee you, I need to hear it. I've been teaching this for over 20 years, and every single stinking time I teach these concepts, within 7 days, God puts me in a conflict. And I want to be a hypocrite and contradict everything I just taught you guys, and I'll have to slow myself down and go, no, I'm not going to do it the way I'm wired to do it. I'm not going to do it the way my family origin did it, and I'm not going to do it based on my hurts and emotions. How do you actually do it, not emotionally, but biblically? Okay, James 4. Let's get a little context for James 4. James is the brother of Jesus. James is one of those who doubts Jesus. He has a radical conversion after Christ raises from the dead, and he ends up not just being a Christian, he ends up being in charge of the Jerusalem church. This means it's a Jewish church. Now, what is the context of a Jewish early Christian church? Maybe the very first church, actually. Well, Jewish Christians were very tied to the text of the Old Testament. They were textual people, and they also had a great strength in interpreting, debating, and discussing the meaning of the text. The good side of that is they were very literate, they were very smart, and they were very, very vigorous about mastering the text. The evil side of that coin of being so about the text is they often would use debate and harm each other's relationships. Apparently, this is what's going on in the first church. And so the Pastor James has got to rebuke them for getting out of control in their arguing with each other. Here's what he writes. It's very simple. Chapter 4, just 3 verses, but genius. He says, what causes fights? Oftentimes when we're fighting, we're not even sure what the cause of the fight is. In fact, in marriage, there's usually 4 facilitators. They're not the reason the fight's happening. They're the thing that causes the fight. What are the 4? I don't got any fill-ins for you. Just find some white space. What are the 4 causes of fights in marriage, the facilitators of fights? One is the bathroom. Who does the cleaning? Who pays the bills? What was it like in your house? Did you have gender roles? My house, there was no gender roles. The guys did every single chore and women did every single chore. But the bathroom, who shuts the lid or keeps it open? The second one is the bedroom. Do I need to say what this one's about? I'm not gonna. You gotta go home and talk to your kids. Okay, the bathroom, the bedroom, the baby. Who's the disciplinarian? Who's the lenient one? What's the philosophy raising them? Should they play a lot of sports? When do they get a phone? What's all that about? And then here's the last one. You got the bathroom, the bedroom, the baby, and the bank account. And that's what the fight about the tree was about, right? The Christmas tree. But it really wasn't about the bank account. That was the facilitator. That was the occasion. Are you with me? So he gives us, what James gives us is the cause that's underneath all of these. And by the way, you could probably add 4 more to these if you could figure out a B word that started with them, right? Okay. What causes quarrels among you? Do not come from, I love this. I love this. Do they not come from, look at this phrase, your desires that battle within you? See, it's not just the number. It's something deeper inside of us. You desire, but you do not have, so you kill. Okay, we're gonna come back to this word. Was there murder in the first Christian church? We're gonna talk about that. You covet, but you cannot get what you want. Very important. So you quarrel and you fight. You do not have because you do not ask God. When you ask, you do not receive because you ask with wrong motives. You have a bad attitude. Your heart isn't right. That you may spend what you get on your pleasures. Your motive is wrong and it's a selfish motive. Okay, what is the James saying here? Let's just break this down. We're gonna not just go verse by verse. We're gonna go idea by idea and really get an idea of this. Why master this material? Why look at these 3 verses and really try to get what James is saying here? And here's the reason. Conflict is absolutely unavoidable. There is no such a relationship without conflict. Every relationship is going to have conflict. In fact, conflict can be very healthy. You shouldn't be afraid of conflict. Oftentimes I'll meet couples. I met this couple early on. I won't tell you their name, but they came into counseling. He had some questions he wanted to run. And as we're talking through them, Kelly and I, they're like, we've never had a fight. We've never had a fight. And immediately all my red flags went on. I said, that's not true. Oh, no, we're perfect. She literally said this to me. Fast forward 7 years, he had an affair, their marriage almost blew up, they barely made it. And you know how they made it? They went to a counselor who coached them on how to fight fair and start having fights. Another couple, young couple, they come together and they immediately need counseling. And it's the first year of their marriage. And they get in there and said, we never stop fighting. And as they were telling us the words that they used with each other, I was like, who told you could speak this way? Well, we're just getting it all out. I'm like, no, leave a lot of it in. The Bible's very clear about your words have the power of life and death. And there's these 2 extremes. And one is we're perfect and we never fight and we're in denial. And the other one is, man, it's all holds barred. I'm gonna say whatever I want. And somewhere in the middle is the Bible telling us that conflict is unavoidable. But if we learn to fight fair, it can become an opportunity. In fact, breakthrough happens when we fight with grace and kindness and maturity. Growth happens. Intimacy happens. Almost everything that's the most important in your relationships, and this is true of all relationships, but especially marriage, it'll come to a tension point before you get the epiphany, the revelation of how to really get the truth of God into that factor. What are those epiphanies? Well, let's keep going on the problem for a minute because we have to understand what he's saying about this. He says, according to James, there are 2 causes to conflict. There are 2 causes. And the first one is deep insecurity. The desires that battle within. 2,000 years before modern psychology, James just nails it. Every single one of us, we have desires that battle within. And what those desires are, they're desires to be secure and they're desires to be significant. In every room we walk into, we're measuring how secure and how significant we feel in that room. We walk into a room, it's a business meeting, and we're like, am I gonna be listened to for my ideas here? Where I'm on the pecking order? Am I gonna move forward with my boss's eyes? Am I gonna move forward with my employees' eyes? Or am I gonna move backwards today? This is why walking into our in-laws' home and walking into the family of origin of our spouse could be so insecure. And this is why it's the big argument is, are we going to your mom's this year? Or are we going to my mom's this year? I don't want to go to your mom's. Well, I don't want to go to your mom's. Well, we'll just stay here and we'll make them bring all the misery to our house. Right? Because when you go into that environment, you don't know where you fit. And oftentimes the rules are slightly different, and the communication's different. I can remember one time, my wife and I, we went home for Thanksgiving. We stayed almost a week, and my wife was just not fitting in. She was just not gelling, and she was not happy the whole time. And we start talking about it, and we're driving back, and we're talking about all the little things. And she said, one of the things is, your family, they snort. I said, what do you mean? We don't snort. She said, no, you guys all think you're so funny and you all tell jokes, you're so humorous, and afterwards, they're just snorting. You all snort, you got these small little noses, and it's a deviated septums, I don't know what it is. And it was just one of these little things that annoyed her, and I was offended. I was like, no one in my family snorts. We've never snorted. I've never heard a snort. I don't know what's bothering you. So fast forward a year, we're driving back to my mom's house. This is my wife's memory. This is how cool she is. She looks right at me and she says, listen for the snorting tonight. So we walk in. 10 minutes into dinner, my brother's like, such and such, ha, 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 ha. My sister's like, oh, 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 ah. I couldn't unhear it. I've been living in a herd of pigs my entire life, and I was blinded to it. You know what security is? Security is the ability to admit that you're insecure. That's all security is. To go, hey, I come into some situations and I'm afraid of what's expected of me there, and I don't feel secure in that situation. I don't even know if I feel visible in that situation. And so when you're having these battles, it makes it very easy to get into unproductive conflict. Then he says the other one, this one is just absolutely so practical. It's unmet wants. You desire, but you do not have. And this is especially true of marriage because we're attracted to people that have things we do not have. And then later on, we don't want those things. So my wife gets creative at about midnight. I start having brain damage at 9:30. So we have big unmet wants. And it can happen in a micro way and it can happen in a macro way. When countries battle, it's because they have battling wants. And when couples battle, it's because they have battling wants. I would love to just stick to every penny in the budget. Kelly hears from the Holy Spirit to give money away about every 10 minutes. And when we value the difference, we become a power couple. When we work against each other, we get into unhealthy conflict. You see how that works? So the baby, the bank account, the bedroom, the bathroom, those are just facilitators. These are the things driving you. And so when you get to discussing these things, when you're still negotiating, well, I changed the oil, that's worth at least 3 bathroom cleanups. You're not having the real conflict yet. But when you say, this makes me afraid, and I feel like I never get this, or I don't really understand what you want here. What do you really want? So these stressors lead, according to James, to 2 or 3 strategies that are very, very unhealthy. The first strategy is slandering people. So he says, so you kill. Now, do we really believe that people were walking around the first church in Jerusalem like Freddy Krueger, just stabbing, like there were 7 murders after the 10 p.m. Why is he saying kill here? Because slander is a particularly heinous sin in the mind of first century Jews. And it's lessened in our culture. In our culture, we just allow gossip and slander. Do you know slander is listed in the Bible with drunkenness and adultery? And why is it so important? Because slander damages a person's future potential. They didn't have credit reports in this day. All they had was their good name. So when you're going around and you're telling people bad things about a person, you're actually lowering their possibilities. You're killing their future. And we do this all the time. And why do we do this? We do it out of insecurity. Instead of just going directly to Pastor Kevin and say, Kevin, I have a conflict with you. Help me understand this. What do you really want out of this? Let you and I talk. What I'll often do, and what we'll all often do, is we'll go, I'm going to go talk to Pastor Andrew first. And then I'm going to go talk to Pastor Ray. I'm going to say, you should really pray for Kevin, man. He's got a challenging thing, and he kind of did something I disagree. And why am I doing that? Why, instead of going directly to Kevin, who I have the conflict with, which the Bible's very clear that's what I should do, because I'm insecure and I want to get 3 people on my team. It's insecurity that makes me go to those other people. Instead of having the courageousness to go, hey, Kevin, it might have been me here, but I don't quite understand what happened there. Let you and I deal with this. So the first destructive approach to conflict is slander. When you go and talk to someone bad about your spouse, not only are you murdering their reputation, you're putting yourself in a very emotionally dangerous place. Very emotionally dangerous. Okay, looking to the wrong source. Oftentimes, what we expect and we want out of the relationship is very important. And we really need it, and we feel it strongly in our soul. But we're asking our spouse or our friend or our mom or our dad to give us something they're not equipped to give us. Ultimately, your spouse can help in your significance, but your significance can only come from your Creator. He knows how you were knit in your mother's womb. Your spouse is still trying to figure out what you meant during your last fight. So you can't look to your spouse for everything. Some stuff you gotta go to the Father and say, Father, I need you to be the source of this for me. And then the last one is expectation. By the way, this is so important, what we expect. But expectation based on a wrong attitude. You've been hurt, and the hurt has locked you into a selfish mode. I deserve, I need, I want. It is so important for you to know what you want and what your preferences are. But when you start putting those preferences over the relationship, that's when it gets destructive. It's not wrong for you to say, I need this and I want this and I've got to have this, but you have to hold the relationship as the higher priority. It's a discussion, it's a compromise, it's a seeking of breakthrough together, not you getting your way. And the problem is marriages get locked into who that keeps score, who's getting their way the most. And by the way, no matter how you keep that score, you're both gonna end up being losers. So what can we do? What can we do to stop talking bad about each other, really have faith that God can meet our needs and get our hearts in the right place? Here's what I suggest. And I've been doing this for a lot of years. Just 4 or 5, sometimes I'll teach this 6. Probably the 4th one is the most important one. Questions you ask. So here's what I want you to do, just really practically. I'm gonna go through these quickly. The next time that you get into a conflict, or you might even plan a conflict, we need to talk about this. I want you to go in and I want you to think about what your normal conflict strategy is, and I want you to set it to the side. You know, I come from a family of yellers. We just yelled at each other and threw things at each other. I can remember once my sister got in a fight with my brother and she threw a kitten on him. Just. So we're yellers and throwers. We don't back down. My wife came from a family of leavers and slammers. Does anyone know what I mean by that? The second it starts getting hot, you run out and slam the door just to show them, right? What happens when a yeller marries a leaver and slammer? Divorce. That is what happens. So we had to learn to walk away from our preference and taught strategies of conflict and go into a more biblical conflict resolution. Okay, here's one way to apply this biblically. 5 great questions. Here they are. Number 1, am I creating distance by using damaging words? So a lot of times we think, I'm just being honest. But we don't realize that our words are actually accelerating the conflict and keeping us from talking about the real thing. Here's a great question to ask yourself. How does someone feel after having a conflict with you? Have you ever been around these wonderful people that just have this gift and you can go into a difficult situation and you messed up and you should be ashamed of what you did, and they point out what you did, but they point out what you did in such an edifying and I got your back and I believe you way that you leave the meeting and go, oh, that person really loves me. And they just rebuke the crud out of you for an hour. You ever met a person like this? Ray can be this way. He's so encouraged. Like he'll sit down with you and goes, I'm gonna tell you the 10 best things about you. And you're like, okay, 11's gonna sting. But it's gonna be true, and he's doing it because he loves me, right? What words can I use? Instead of slander, let's do the opposite. What words can I use that don't create any damage? Number 2, what do you, the person that you're talking to, what is it, your spouse, what do they really want? This is so important. Almost all the time, we're arguing about the wrong thing. Almost all the time, the argument is not about what it's really about. So you can pause and say, help me understand. And oftentimes when people get activated, especially, they don't even know what they really want. A child will come to a parent and say, I want to go to this social event. Well, we don't think that's a good environment for you. Well, I want it. Well, you're not going to go, and it's my way or the highway. Guess what? When you do the my way or the highway, it's always going to be the highway eventually. So you got to stop and go, help me. Why do you want to go there so bad? Here's your mom and I's concerns. And there might be 1 layer or 2 layer, and on the 3rd layer, they're going to say, man, I just don't feel like I have really any friends at this high school. I'm tired of being lonely. Oh, you don't want to be lonely. You and I can work on that. One of the phrases I've used with my kids and in my marriage, I've used it so much in my marriage, we don't even do it now. We kind of automatically go there. But I say, here's the phrase I use. This feels like me against you and you against me. How can we change it to me and you against the problem? Because me and you are a great team. And by the way, we throw Jesus on this team, we're unstoppable against that problem. So what do they want? What do they want? And then here's one. What do I want? What do I want? Sometimes if I just ask myself this question, I'll realize what I want is stupid. And I'll go, that's a fleshly thing to want. Why am I wanting that? I'm better than that. And sometimes I'll go, you know what? What I want is important to this relationship and this family. Or at least I think it is. I need to talk that through and help them understand. Oftentimes we're being activated and there's a deep want in us and we haven't even taken the time to articulate it to ourselves. I don't like the constriction of this. Well, when we used to travel quite a bit, we'd go into these university towns, and right next to the university would be these old, beautiful homes. And my wife loves old, beautiful homes. And she'd say, oh my goodness, let's buy that home. And I would begin to explain to her in Larry Burkett's style why we cannot make the mortgage payment on that home. And finally, after having like 4 of these conflicts, she said, can I have 10 minutes to dream? I was like, that's a fair want. I said, you don't understand. One time I said, you don't understand the finances. And the second it came out of my mouth, I realized that she had 2 degrees, graduated cum laude in both those degrees, and I graduated thank you, Lordy. She's like, no, I understand the economics. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about, can I have space in a very stressed financial time to dream? And can I just say my dream out loud? I'm like, the second she said it, I was like, of course, that's what you want? Oh, I'm happy to give that to you. Dream all you want. In fact, go buy a lotto ticket because that's the only way this is going to happen. I'm just joking. Here's the money one. You ready for the money one? This is my favorite. What would happen if I gave them what they want? This is where you feel the Holy Spirit come in. By the way, you know why I like this one? Because this is a heart issue and an empathy issue and an affection issue, not a technique issue. So you use all the techniques and you don't have the right heart, you don't have the right attitude, you're still asking from a selfish motive, none of this will work. This one gets to the heart thing. And by the way, if you got the heart thing right, you can forget the questions. You'll still find your way through. But this one, I love this question because all of a sudden when I drag it out into the daylight and they just want more quality time and conversation, or they want to be heard on an issue they're not being heard on, or they just want me to not fix it, that old one, guys, right? And I'm like, of course, baby. Of course I can give you that. I'm sorry I haven't been giving you that. That's what it is. That's what's fueling this tree thing. Oh, I can help you with that. And the second you give in on one of these wants that you can give in on, It builds powerful intimacy. Oh, you walked that difficult conversation with me, and then you surrendered your preference. That's sexy. Hey, security is sexy. Significance is sexy. And when you add security and significance, talk about intimacy and being known. Sometimes you can't give them what they want though, right? And especially in parenting, this is really good. If you have the conversation, hey, what do you really want? And what do your mom and I really want in this? And you really go a couple layers deep. And on this one, you've got to go full Spice Girls. What do you really, really want? I'll tell you what I want. What I really, really want. And you realize, son, daughter, spouse, I can't give you that because it's not biblical. Let's talk about this. I love you too much to let you hurt yourself in this way. Or sometimes it's not practical. I'd love to give you that. I remember we were in line one time. My daughter was 4 years old. They had a Barbie display right there at the register, so evil. And she's like, Dad, I need the mermaid Barbie. I need the mermaid Barbie. I was like, baby, we can't afford mermaid Barbie this month. And she said, oh, Dad, just pull out the Visa. 4 years old, and somehow she sensed that we were pulling out the Visa a little bit too much. I can't give that to you right now, baby. It's just not practical. It's just not practical. Okay. How much time we got? We had 20 seconds. Oh no, I don't think we're getting to all the fill-ins, people. Should I ask God for this want? Should I ask God for this want? Here's the thing. Even if your heart's right, and even if your technique's right, and you really, really appreciate the verse, conflict is difficult. And so it doesn't always resolve in one nice, neat little conversation. Sometimes you can say what you really, really want, and the history of those hurts and those challenges are so deep that it takes more than one conversation. And oftentimes when you get in that situation where it takes more than one conversation, it's good to pull in a peer couple. A couple you trust, they may be the next step and say, help us in this conversation. We got the right heart, we're for each other, we're asking the right questions, but we're still struggling. That's okay. This is not simple. It's not just to check the box. We asked the 5 questions and now we're done. Get some help, pull in a peer. Come to the Wednesday nights, engage in a small group. And sometimes you'll get a great peer couple in your life and you'll get a great small group and you got a great heart and you're asking the right questions and it's still hard. Guess what you do then? You ask Jesus. In fact, you might just start there with asking Jesus. Because we're complicated people, amen? And we're really good at bugging the crud out of each other, aren't we? And sometimes we just got to go back to the Lord. All right. We'll speed through the fill-ins, just because Saturday night's my favorite service. All right, here we go. You ready? The goal of effective conflict resolution is to honestly uncover the insecurities. So the goal is not to win, get winning out of your thing. The goal is to talk about what's making me have battles within and to articulate real wants. The goal is to get to that really, really want. Go one layer deeper and one layer deeper. What should we be talking about when we have serious conversations? What am I not getting that I really want? What are you not getting that you really want? Find a clear winner is a horrible strategy. Finding a clear winner is a horrible strategy. Stop keeping score. Referee whose version is the most, of past events is the most accurate. So conflict resolution gets so much worse when we start saying what the other person said. Have you ever been in that conflict? Well, you just said, no, I didn't say that. I was right here when you said it. Does anyone know what I'm talking about? Okay, here's the problem. When you make the conversation about getting clarity over past events, you're gonna lose. Why? Because you don't remember the past events. You have had far too much Splenda. Oh, that's funny. I don't care if you didn't laugh. You know, the artificial sweeteners, they say it causes brain damage, but I drink it every day. You don't have an accurate view of your past events. Your spouse doesn't have an accurate view. Your kids don't have an accurate view. And so arguing about what's the most accurate view is a futile exercise. Don't do it. Stop. Change every hard-hearted person. Sometimes you can do all this right and it still doesn't work. Amen? Your job is to get on the biblical path for your conflict skills, and most importantly, your heart of empathy and love and kindness as you bring those skills. So my kids, I'll finish with this story, got into this horrible cycle while I was traveling quite a bit. This was right before we moved to Elk Grove, of just battling with each other. They could not get along. Does anyone have kids like this? I just wanted to rename all three of them We Are Legion. I mean, first of all, they're separated by 5 years and 4 years, so they don't have anything in common, and the youngest one annoyed the oldest one, and the middle one was always stuck in the middle, and she was really sensitive, and whenever there was conflict, she would cry, and it was just chaos. And I would come home from a trip, and I'd walk in the door, and my wife would be in tears, and all three of them would be in tears, and I just got teaching in 3 states about how to be a great parent. And so finally, one trip I came home, and I was so frustrated. I marched right in the living room. All 3 of my kids are in there fighting. I sat them down, and they started going, Dad, she said, and Dad, he did, and Dad. And they wanted me to do the judge thing, the judge and jury thing, where I heard all the versions, and I said, quiet. The judge quits. The jury quits. No more judge, no more jury, just sentence her. I'm not gonna hear a single reason why this conflict happened. I'm not gonna judge who caused it, who started it first. I don't care who hit who started it, who said what, who didn't do what, who left their thing out. I don't care. From now on, we're like a military platoon. If one person messes up, we all get punished. Everyone gets punished. My son raised his hand. He said, well, what does that mean, mess up? What does that mean? And I said, if mom is not happy, period. The second mom's not happy, everyone loses a privilege, everyone gets a timeout. Of course, they didn't blame me. So next day, something's going on. Mom starts getting a little grumpy. I marched in there. All right, everyone give me the Game Boys and stuff. Everyone go sit in this corner, Woo, woo. I remember Jesse just sat down like, let's get this over with. And Maddie, who's usually the one who did nothing wrong, would start going, I'm so sorry. I apologize. And she went and sat over here, and Emma just ran. You can't catch me, old man. She just ran. And so I had to make them sit down. And they didn't believe me for like a month. I just kept doing it. Every time mom got stressed, they lost privileges, they had to sit down. Every time. Finally, after about 2 months, you could hear them in the next room, and they'd start to argue a little bit, and they'd, shh, quiet. He's gonna come in there. He'll come in here. You just shut up. And I was like, cool, they're kind of self-regulating. And then in another month, they just kind of settled down, and they just realized not to activate each other. I remember I came home from this one trip. I'd been gone for a little while, and I come in, I gave my wife a hug, and I was like, what's that noise? She said, what noise? I'm like, yeah, it's so peaceful in here. I said, did you give them away, or? She said, no, they're all down in the basement. They're down in the basement. So I go down in the basement. There's this big piece of butcher paper on the floor, and there's crayons everywhere. And Jesse's drawing this really cool robot, and he's battling this giant Godzilla lizard, and just bombs are going. And Maddie has drawn in the sky a Pegasus unicorn that's got lasers coming out of its eye for the thing. And Emma's not drawing anything. She's just got a pile of crayons in both hands, and she's going, and they're all laughing. And I just started to cry. I said, let me tell you, conflict resolution is hard work. It doesn't happen overnight. But man, the joy, the fruit of peace and harmony, and it's not always gonna be perfect, and it wasn't always perfect with my kids after that, but the hard work of biblical, kind, grace-filled, God-focused conflict is worth the fruit of unity and security and families loving one another. Amen? Can I pray for you? God, I thank you for each and every person in here. Someone is in here and they've had a conflict recently and they don't know how to get out of it. Someone, Lord, they've stopped having conflict because they made no progress and they just got tired. whether they've had a bad conflict or given up on having good conflict, or they're somewhere in between. Lord, I pray that your word would give us fresh hope, that if we'll put in the hard work of learning to renew our mind, love one another, quit trying to win the argument and start trying to win the person, that hard work really will pay dividends. And I ask it in Jesus' name. And everyone said,
Hey guys, Pastor Mark here, one of the senior pastors around here. So glad that you are actually part of Bayside Online. You really are part of our family. We have grown over the last couple of years online a ton, and we really do consider you as part of our church family. So what that means is make sure you subscribe and share this. It's great. But also get in a community group. Start watching the Bible study. Start being engaged. Even give. One of the ways that we can actually do online church and have this global community and even do the ministry of our campuses is by people partnering with us in the gospel, as Paul talks about in Philippians chapter 1. And that means by your resources, financially, there are people all over the world getting blessed through what we do at Bayside. And so obviously part of that is giving and using and stewarding that for the glory of God. So we're super thankful if you do that. We'd love you to start doing that, and just super thankful you're part of our church. So glad you're with us. Make sure that you let us know you're watching and part of this, because we want to get in touch with you and thank you and serve you any way we can. Anyway, thanks guys, and we will see you next week.